I want you to imagine a world where Twitter is just a sound. It's just a noise. Imagine with me just for a moment a world where the cloud is something that turns dark and produces rain. Imagine with me a world just for a moment that 4G is where you parked your car at the airport. And you got to remember where it was so you can be able to find your car. Imagine a world where LinkedIn, it's really bad. That means you were sentenced to prison. You were linked in. Imagine a world where application simply meant you were a senior in high school and you were about to fill out an application so you could get accepted into college. See, what I'm describing for you today, it's a lost tribe. That is the world called 2007. That world is long gone. We live in a new age today. We live in a new world. And today we are starting a brand new series. It's going to be a three-week series called Connected 3D. And this is a series about technology. Now, just to be clear, this is not an anti-technology series. I grew up in a very conservative Baptist church growing up. Anybody ever grow up in, like me, maybe a very conservative home, very conservative environment? Some of you did. And I remember whenever I was a teenager, it was kind of a legalistic church. They had a lot of rules and regulations. And they did this thing with all the teenagers where they told us that we were going to bring in what they called all of our rock music. And so we like brought in like Metallica and Bon Jovi. They told us to bring all this stuff. So we had a lot of it. So we brought all of our music, and they said, okay, we're going to do like a burning ceremony. And they literally like asked us like to take all that out and like burn it. And we're like, no! Just so to be really crystal clear, I'm not going to have a time where we all get together and ask you to bring your iPhones and your iPads, and we're not going to burn them all. That's not the goal of this series. Although, how many of you admit it might be nice to like try that sometime? This is not an anti-technology series. This is a series as followers of Jesus. We have to understand what God says. And you say, does God talk about technology? And I'm going to say, yes, I believe he does. And we're going to talk about that today. And if you're not a follower of Jesus, maybe you're just kind of checking us out, man, I want to say welcome. Some of you are here, and maybe you found us last week at the Easter service. And if you found us at the Easter service last week, welcome to our campus. Can we just welcome them here today? We're glad that you've found us and you're checking us out. So even if you're not a follower of Jesus, listen, I believe this series will be extremely helpful for you. If you are a follower of Jesus, I believe that there are some musts in this series that you must understand. If you are going to be a fully devoted follower of Jesus, there are some principles that you cannot miss. This is a series as followers of Jesus, how we can be pro-wisdom when it comes to technology. Now, I want you to imagine another world with me, if you will, just for a moment. It's going to be hard, but we're going to go back. I want you to imagine a world where if we said the word Amazon, we would immediately know that's a river in South America. Now some of you you're not going to know this. You're not going to understand this because it's too far back, but some of you will remember it. Imagine a world that if you were in your car, and you were driving down a highway and you broke down, that you would have to either do one of two things. You would either have to like wait for somebody to help you, probably a stranger, or else you would have to walk somewhere to find this archaic device. It's probably in the Smithsonian right now. It's called a payphone. And you won't believe this. I know we got a lot of junior high students up in the balcony. You guys are going to laugh at this, but it's the truth. You would have to like pull out a quarter. Everybody remember this? If you make a phone call, you put a quarter into this machine, and then you can call and you can ask for help. Anybody remember these days? Man, you guys are older. He said it was a dime. Now he's really showing his age right there. Imagine with me a world where you go out to a restaurant and you go out to eat with some friends, or you go out to eat with your family, and there's no beeps. There's no buzzes. There's no phone calls. It's just you. That is called a long-lost world, a long-lost tribe called 1997. Way back in the day. Would you not agree that our world is changing at an exponential rate of speed? You know, if you begin to study history, there's always been these advances in innovation. And if you study history, one of the early things, about 500 years in, they invented this thing called a wheel. And I mean, it was an amazing piece of technology of that day and time. I mean, imagine a wheel. And then imagine what they could do with the wheel. And because they invented this wheel, all of a sudden, now you have transportation. And imagine how transportation completely changed their world and changed their society. That happened about 3500 BC. And then another great invention, it happened in 900 AD, was gunpowder. Now, just to tell you, I mean, that blows my mind. You got a wheel at 3500 BC, and then we don't discover gunpowder until 900 AD. It's like that's how long it took for technology to advance. And because then you have gunpowder, but it took them about 100 years after they discovered gunpowder to truly understand its effects. And of course, that changed the world as well. That changed how wars were fought. I began to read about innovation, and from 1650 to 1850, there was some great technological advances. Shipping happened at that time, and shipping changed the world. From 1650 to 1850 is also when the printing press was invented. And of course, the printing press changed the world. That changed education and what you're able to discover and what you can be able to learn and what you can be able to pass on to other people. And then from 1850 to 1950, there were some incredible inventions. There was photography and the telephone. I mean, imagine this. You're able to talk to someone else that's not in the room. Use this thing called a telephone. I mean, it's incredible. But then from 1950 to 2000, there were some major innovations. Television was invented, and that changed the world. When you begin to understand the rate of speed of change, and then the computer was invented. And it's happening at this exponential rate of speed. That's why your phone that you just bought right now, it's already out of date. There's already a newer, better model, even if you bought it last month. This world is changing quickly all around us. And there are a lot of screens that we have in our home. Have you ever taken a moment just to kind of think through how many screens you have? You ever thought about how many screens and computers and tablets and TVs? How many of you remember when there was only one screen in the house? When I was a little boy, I remember we had this gigantic TV. And it was almost like it was this piece of furniture. It was oak all around it. And you had a TV. And my job was I was my dad's remote control. My dad, literally, when I was a little kid, he would say, "Brian!" And I'd come in the room and he'd say, "Channel 4. And I would go over the knob and I would click it a few times. Then I'd go back to start playing. He'd come back and say, "Brian, Channel 2. Listen, the only reason why I think some of you were born is because your dad wanted a remote control. And then once remote controls were invented, they said, we don't need kids anymore. Man, the world has changed a lot, has it not? And there's been a lot of technology that's been invented. I was reading about inventions and the pen. When the pen was invented, man, it changed the world. But did you know that there were some skeptics? Socrates was a skeptic of the pen. And he feared the pen. And here's why he feared the pen. Because he says, I recognize the problems that the pen can solve, but we have to ask ourselves this question: how will the pen affect us? Not just what problems is it going to solve, but how's it going to affect us? And so he began to talk against the pen because he said what it can do is it can affect the human brain. And if you now have a pen, you are not going to memorize like you were able to memorize before in the past. So he began to ask some questions that I thought was very interesting, not just about what problem is this going to solve, but the question is, how will this pen affect us? And isn't it interesting that this was an invention one day? This was like the height of technological advancement was the pen. And this is what I find very interesting, is that as technology continues to keep advancing at this incredible rate of speed, shouldn't life be getting easier? Isn't that what technology is all about? Is how do we make life easier? How do we make it quicker? How do we make it faster? How do we make life more enjoyable because we now have technology? But we find just the opposite. People are more tired and more busy than they've ever been with all of the technology, with all of the advancements. Matter of fact, I bet some of you, you did this just as you were coming into church. Somebody said, you saw a friend, you said, hey, how you doing? And your response was, busy. How you doing? Oh, I'm busy. And we look at each other and we say, oh, busy. Thumbs up. That's awesome. You must be important. You must be working on some big things. How you doing? Busy, man. I'm busy. I'm busy. Oh, that's good. What if busyness wasn't a badge of honor? What if busyness was a badge of brokenness? What if the world isn't about being busy? I mean, we go out and we build and we build and we advance, and all these things are great things, but then we have to build enough Starbucks on every single corner so we can consume enough coffee because we're so busy and we're so tired. What do we need? We need caffeine. We have all of this technology. And like I said, technology is not a bad thing. But how is it affecting us? Is the question we have to ask ourselves. In 1997, they did this study of 9 to 11-year-olds. And they had a list of values. And they asked them to rank these values of how important they were to 9 through 11-year-olds. And in 1997, they came back, and these 9 through 11-year-olds put fame as number 15. That was the 15th value of importance to them, was fame. They recently did the exact same study, and fame from 9-year-old to 11-year-olds is now number 1 value. I see it even in my own daughter. I see it in my own son. It's like my daughter for Halloween. It's like, you know what she wanted to be for Halloween? Steph Curry. That's who she was. She got a wig. She did the whole thing. She had the jersey on. And now when I get home, she says, don't call me Mercedes. Don't call me Sadie. She says, call me Steph Curry. And so I said, well, I want you to call me Papa. She said, okay, so here's what we'll do. She says, whenever you get home from work, you have 3 seconds to call me Steph Curry, and then I'll respond by calling you Papa. And she says, and if you don't, you owe me 3 push-ups. So that's the game I play with my daughter. Whenever I come home and I say, Steph Curry. She says, Papa. It's amazing how technology changes us and what we see and who our kids desire to be. YouTube is changing the world. And don't mistake me. Great things come from an innovation. Great things come from technology. Man, we leverage technology here at Crosspoint Church. The funny thing is this, is that yesterday I posted that video that we just watched, and I had like 700 views. All within like just a few hour period of time. Some of you watched it. Some of you are here today because of technology. So I'm not anti-technology. Some of you found us through Yelp. How many of you found our church through Yelp or maybe through Google? Just kind of raise your hand right now. See, you found us through technology. That's how the world operates. So I'm not anti-technology. That's not what this series is about. But the series is about how can we be pro-wisdom. And the question, not just how is the world changing around us, but how is this changing us? So I want to just go to Scripture for a moment. And I want to just see what God says about our world. And if you want to know what God says, you have to go, and you want to understand more about our world and how our world works and how we work, you have to go back to the very beginning in Genesis chapter 1. If you want to see how the world was set up. And in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 27, it says this. So God, he created human beings in his own what, church? That word in the Hebrew is the word icon, interesting enough. That we were created in God's image, in his icon. So just like on your computer, you have an icon, and you click the icon, and when you click the icon, the program is open, and you're able to understand what is inside of that icon. Well, God says the same thing about us, that you and I as human beings, we were created so that whenever you click us and you open us up, what's supposed to be revealed? God is supposed to be revealed through us. We are the image bearers of God. In the image of God, he created them male and female. He created them. You are an icon. You are an image bearer of God. And here's what he said in verse 28. He said, here's your job. I want you to be fruitful, and I want you to multiply. And then he goes on in verse 28, and he says, I want you to have dominion on all of the world. Now, the word dominion simply means, I want you to rule. I want you to reign. I want you to be fruitful. I want you to multiply, and you are in charge. So at creation, God, he began to create, and then he began to hand out job descriptions. And he said, this is your role. This is what I want you to do. So he created the birds. And he told the birds, listen, birds, I want you to soar. I want you to fly. I want you to create migration patterns. But I want you to be careful, birds, because some of you are very delicious. But your job, it's to soar. And then he created the fish. And he said, listen, some of you are delicious too. Be careful. But I want you to swim. I want you to go up and down the current. And then he created the stars. And he says, listen, the stars, you're going to divide the day and the night, and you're going to shine. And you're going to reveal my glory. And he says, listen, people are going to be in awe of you. Songs are going to be written about you as stars. You are to shine. And then he created humans. And he said, you are my image bearers. When people see you, I want them to see me. That's amazing. Woven into the fabric of our DNA that we are the image bearers, the icons of God. We were created in his image. God said, listen, the ocean, it's beautiful, but it's not my image bearer. Because you as humans, that's your job. Your job is to be fruitful and to multiply and exercise dominion over all of the world. He says, listen, you're going to have kids, and you're supposed to exercise dominion in your home, in your family. He says, you are to name the animals. And I want you to see the earth as this massive project that you're in charge of. And God says, please don't misunderstand this, though. This is what he told the human beings from day one. I've given you a job description to have dominion over all the world. But don't forget, I'm God. I'm in charge. Here's the hierarchy. God, his image bearer, humans, and the world. And he says, this is the proper order. This is the context. I'm in charge. Have you learned yet that God's in charge and he doesn't need an assistant God? That he's got the whole world under control? that he is in charge. God says, listen, I'm a better God than you are. So understand the hierarchy. But he gives out these jobs, and he says, I want you to exercise dominion. And every one of you that have a job, you exercise dominion. You're ruling. You're managing. You're stewarding. So if you are in government, your responsibility is to have dominion over government and resources. Listen, if you're a homemaker, your job is to exercise dominion in your home. They're in your family. And you can exercise dominion in faith-filled ways or in faithless ways. We know this is true because if you've ever moved into a new city or a new town, what do? You begin to put some feelers out there and you begin to ask and you say, hey, does anybody have a good doctor that you would recommend? See, because you're looking for somebody that exercises dominion in a very faith-filled way. And I'm not just talking about being a Christian. I'm just talking about understanding dominion, understanding how to rule in an incredible way. And some of you say, hey, do you know any good restaurants? Because we recognize the value of people that understand dominion and exercising dominion in this incredible way, and we can appreciate it. And we begin to ask, does anybody have a good real estate agent that understands exercising dominion? And that's what God says, I want you to do. And we've seen people do it in very poor and faithless ways as well, have we not? That they exercise dominion. They just, look at 2008. We had this economic meltdown. And how did that happen? Because people were exercising dominion in faithless, poor ways. They were using things for selfishness as opposed to understanding how do we be able to rule and how do we have dominion in faith-filled ways. So when we understand being faithful, I want to challenge you today that if you are a doctor, do it in a faith-filled way. Exercise dominion to give God glory in your profession. If you're a real estate agent, exercise dominion in a faith-filled way to give glory to be an image bearer of God. If you are a supervisor, if you're an owner, exercise dominion in a way recognizing that you are the image bearer of God. Recognize that if you're a manager or you're a lawyer, exercise dominion in a faith-filled way as an image bearer of God. Listen, those of you that are students, listen to me. Learn. Make sure that you learn. Make sure you study. Why? So that you can exercise dominion in whatever field God puts you in so that you can do it to His honor and to His glory. That's what God wants us to do. He said, be fruitful, multiply, and exercise dominion. I put you here for this purpose. Here at Crosspoint Church, we have some values. Now, I don't have it on the screen, but one of our values is relentless improvement. And we're always asking ourselves, how do we make things better? How do we serve your families better? How do we make sure our children's ministry and our worship and my preaching, and how do we make sure that we do all this better? Because we are on a mission to help lead you to find and follow Jesus. And we take this exercising dominion very seriously. Because we understand, and I believe many of you understand, how important it is to exercise dominion, that you understand the sacred art of stewarding dominion. Being faithful. So God's hierarchy is God. And then man being image bearers. And then the world is under us. Now listen to me closely. Technology is about dominion. Technology is about how we manage. And here's the challenge. It's when the hierarchy gets flipped. That's when everything falls apart. So if you go back into Genesis, God created Adam and Eve as these image bearers of God. But guess what they decided they wanted to do? They wanted to flip the hierarchy. And they wanted to take God's seat. And that's when everything fell apart. God said, listen, I want you to exercise dominion. And so they didn't have a rake like this, okay, in the Garden of Eden. It didn't have, okay, like a wooden hand on all this. But they were exercising dominion in the garden. And guess what they were doing? They were managing it. And they were taking care of it. And they were making it better. And they were ruling over the garden. They were naming the animals. And they were ruling over the garden. But when the hierarchy gets flipped, and all of a sudden they decide to take God's seat, then the rake that they were using to be able to exercise dominion for, all of a sudden can now be used as a weapon. The problem isn't with the rake. The problem has everything to do with the hierarchy, of flipping the hierarchy, of trying to take God's seat. That's why if you've ever been involved in Celebrate Recovery, or if you've ever been involved in AA, here, let me give you the steps. I've got them on the screen. There are some steps you have to take, and basically what's happening is the hierarchy is getting flipped. So number one, you admit we're powerless over our addictions and compulsive behaviors, that our lives have become unmanageable. So we realize we're powerless, we're not God, we're not in charge. And then number two, we come to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. That's the second step. And then the third step is this: we made a decision to turn our lives and our wills over to the care of God. And here's why this is such a powerful process. Because it's changing the hierarchy. Do you see what's happening here? The hierarchy. There's great healing when you understand God is in charge and our role as image bearers, and then we are to exercise dominion over the world. So healing comes when you put God back where he belongs. Does that make sense? Anytime the hierarchy gets flipped, that's when there's incredible damage that happens. It all has to do with the hierarchy. That's what salvation is about. Salvation is simply you saying, God, you can have your seat back. God, you can become the boss, the coach, and the CEO of my life. But when Adam and Eve sinned, that's when the world became a dangerous place. But after the sin, God never revokes the ability of humans to have dominion. Now, I got to get to this because time's running out. Genesis chapter 10. Genesis chapter 10 tells the story of this king in his day and time, and his name was Nimrod. Genesis chapter 10, verse 9. That's right, Nimrod was his name. So this man is like Nimrod. But at that day and time, Nimrod wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It says he was the greatest hunter in all of the world. Now, I got a picture of Nimrod. So this is what they believe Nimrod looked like. In the Hebrew, it's duck commander, I think. You know, like. In his day and time, when Nimrod was the king, when he was ruling and reigning, there was one language that was on the earth. And if you were going to build, if you were going to exercise dominion in Nimrod's day, you would have to use logs and you would have to use stones. But the problem with stones is that you can't stack them. So you can only do so much building because of stones. But in Nimrod's day, there was this advancement of technology that happened where they invented the brick. And this was amazing in Nimrod's day. Because once they invented the brick, they figured out, okay, you can take sand, you can put it together, and you heat this thing up. Now, all of a sudden, you have a brick, and everybody was in awe of the brick. Because for the very first time, you could begin to stack. And if you could stack with a brick rather than a stone, you can build like you've never built before. The brick was the height of technological advancement. It's like if you went to a party and somebody pulled out a brick, you'd say, who invited the rich guy? It's like people would camp out all night long so they could get the new brick 7. People in Nimrod's day, they would brag about being early adopters of the brick. The brick was this incredible invention. So here's what they decided to do. They decided that they were going to build a tower. And they had one language, and they said, we're going to build this tower, but we want this tower to go all the way up to God. And essentially what they were saying is we want to flip the hierarchy. We want to become God. And it says in Genesis chapter 11 and verse 8, it says that God, he confounded their language. And it says in that way, the Lord scattered them all over the world and they stopped building the city. So they all spoke one language, and then God, he said, hey, you're going to speak this language, you're going to speak Spanish, you're going to speak Tagalog, you're going to speak all these other different languages, you're going to speak French, and it confounded them, so they couldn't actually build the tower. So why did he do that? Because they were trying to flip the hierarchy, and they were scattered. And the place is called the Tower of Babel. Now, here's the point today. God had no problem with the brick. There wasn't a problem with the brick. He said, take the brick. I want you to build houses, build cities. But he had a problem with what they did with the brick. Nimrod is the very first person that we can discover in the Bible that used technology in a very faithless, destructive way. He is the poster child for using technology in a destructive way. That's why today, whenever somebody's like texting and driving, and they almost hit you, and you call them a Nimrod, there are some really true, deep theological connection that comes along with that. So here's the question. In 2017, what are we doing with our bricks? Have we been Nimrod in the way that we use them? It's not the brick that's the problem. It's how we use it that's very important to God. Facebook is simply a brick. Facebook is something that can be used to organize and be able to get information out. And part of the reason why we had such a large crowd at Easter is because we know how to leverage the brick of technology to be able to get the word out. We know how to use the brick extremely well here at Crosspoint Church. But let me also tell you, at the same time, people can be able to post some stuff. And they can use the brick in a very destructive way as well. And the next time that you're tempted to post in a way that's destructive, to use the brick in a destructive way, just make sure that what you do is you just hashtag it Nimrod. Because that's essentially what you're doing. Listen, understand that Facebook can be an incredible tool to be able to connect with people. But did you know that because of the brick of Facebook, that a third of divorces in divorce courts cite Facebook as one of the reasons for divorce? Because people are connecting with other people through Facebook. Boyfriends and girlfriends from the past. It's possible for you to be in the room but never be in the room because of your brick. It's possible for you to be there but not be all there. See, the internet, it's simply a brick. It's a great resource. I mean, we have like a church app where you can download, you can be able to write in your prayer request, and people immediately can be able to pray, get your prayer request and pray for it. You can be able to watch sermons, all because of this brick that we've learned how to leverage. You can be able to give online through this brick that we have. But also at the same time, the internet can be used for pornography. The brick is not the problem. It's how we use it. And here's what we're not going to do here at Crosspoint. We're not going to give you like, hey, here's, limit yourself to X amount of hours and only use it during this time. If we were to do anything like that, that would be called legalism. And that's not God's plan either. But I want to give you a couple questions as we wind this message down. The first question is this. With every device you bring into your home, you ask yourself, what problem does this solve? That's why we buy a laptop. That's why we buy a phone. That's why we do all these things, because they solve problems. They're great to be able to solve problems. But we have to ask ourselves a second question. With every device that we bring into the home, what problem does it create? And this is a question that we rarely ask ourselves, that we rarely think through. See, if you give your 10-year-old a phone, the reason why you do that is to solve a problem. You want them to have access to you, right? You want them to be able to call you. You want them to be able to know that you're there. It solves an incredible problem. But let me ask you this question. Does it create any problems? And what problems does it create? It's just some questions to ask yourself. What problems does it create? How is this going to affect our family dinners? How will this affect our date nights? How is this going going to affect the way we just communicate, the way we talk. Here's the third question. Do you rule over your devices, or do they rule over you? See, I believe that so often we become what I call people of the buzz and people of the beep. You ever been with somebody? We all know people like this. Maybe we've done this. Maybe we know people like this. You're in a conversation, then all of a sudden it buzzes. It beeps, and it's, hold on. And we become people of the buzz and people of the beep. The question is, how is it affecting us? I want to leave you with one of our core values here at Crosspoint Church. I think it's an appropriate value. One of our values is this. It's focus. I want to ask you just to say this with me. We will be intentional about saying yes to the best and no to the rest. James 1:8 says, a double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways. So we ask ourselves this question. Is this a good thing? Or is this a God thing? Once again, I'm not anti-technology. I just think we have to understand the importance of being focused. Of not just being there, but being all there. I want to ask you to pull out your connection card, if you would, as our ushers come forward. There's some next steps I want to ask you to take. I'm asking that don't log off right now. Stay logged on. James says don't just be a hearer of the word of God, but be a doer. These are some action steps. Number one, I'm asking Jesus to forgive me of my sin, take full control of my life for the first time today. That is simply you changing the hierarchy, saying, God, you are in charge of my life. You're the boss, coach, CEO. Number two, I will attend the Connected 3D series as much as possible for the next 2 weeks. And I want to encourage you, do not miss next week. Because next week, we are giving every family a packet that we've been working on the series for about 5 months now. We've been having these meetings like crazy with this whole team that we have that has put this whole series together. And we've got a whole packet that we're only going to give away next Sunday, one for every family. And it has tools and resources on how to have conversations with your children, how to have conversations with your teenagers, how to experience, not just information. I mean, we're in the information age of overload, but how to experience more time together. What does this look like practically in your family? We're giving all your kids downstairs 3D glasses, and they're going to have some experiences that you guys can be able to do during dinner time together. So I want to encourage you, do not miss next week. Bring some friends, bring some family. We're going to give you some incredible resources. Here's the third thing. This week, I will discuss how technology is changing us with those that live under my roof. It's a great question to ask. Or the last one, I'll check out homepointoc.com. That is a special website that we've created. Or else the kiosk on the patio for additional resources on how to manage technology in a God-honoring way. I hope that this series has been helpful for you. I hope this message has been helpful for you. I'm looking forward to this series as we continue. If you want to invite some people with you as you go out today, you can be able to pick up these little invite cards. It's a great way to be able to invite some people. Last thing I want to say before we receive our offering today is I just want to tell you how proud I am of you, of the way that you served and the way that you brought your friends last week at Easter. You guys hit it out of the park. I looked out and I saw 400 or 500 red shirts everywhere of volunteers ready to serve, ready to help. You guys came on Saturday, you loaded, you brought things back. I mean, the worship team practiced for hours. People were working like crazy. And can I tell you, this church outgrew me a long time ago. It takes every single one of us together. And last Sunday, we had 72 people that spontaneously came forward and got baptized. And for those of you that got baptized, I want to tell you I'm proud of you. You're taking next steps to grow in your faith. And listen to me, every single one of you that served last week, you were a link on the chain of somebody finding and following Jesus. And church, I'm excited about what God is going to continue to do in us and through us. And I honor you for your serving. I'm proud of you. And listen, church, the best is yet to come. But at the same time, I'm enjoying the days that we're in right now as well.